Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Retrospectives podcast. My name is Patrick Arthur, and I am joined once again by my co-host, James Sterlings. I am very grateful to have you back, James. How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good, Pat. You seems like you were struggling a bit last episode without me, so thought I'd just come back to, give you a hand.
Struggling is absolutely correct. For those who don't know, the last episode on Tony Hawk's, James was very sick, so I had to do it solo. And even more worryingly, I had to do the editing, which is normally James' ballpark. And the final product was rather suspicious. So I am very grateful to have James back helping me out. The other significant upside is that my opinions are always elevated when James is there because in comparison, my opinions are so much better. When they're by themselves, they're not so obviously the right one.
Fuck you.
Nice riposte there, James. So here on the Retrospectives podcast, what we do is we look at old games through a modern lens. What that means is that we're not trying to evaluate games in the context in which they were created. We're not trying to forgive games for their flaws and problems because of the limited hardware on which they were created. We are simply interested in answering the question, how good or fun are these games to play today? So this week we are doing Pokémon Snap, a Nintendo 64 title that is also available on the Wii U Virtual Console, and it is a game that James has selected. Before we get into the meat of the discussion, however, there are some technical issues that we had with this game that we need to go over first. So, on a basic level, we played on the Nintendo 64 emulator called Project 64. But with this game, it doesn't work right out of the box. You have to do some modifications first.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of gameplay that is entirely cut out if you try to emulate this game using the default settings. And so, after a lot of Googling and fiddling around, we've managed to get it working in a pretty stable state. So what we'll do is we will link the instructions to fixing it up on emulator. So for those who want to emulate the game, you should be able to play it using the instructions. And we'll leave them on the main page on our website.
Yeah, and the instructions, it's not stupidly complicated. It's a matter of following a few steps. I will note that I did see a slight performance drop in some areas with these settings. It's nothing backbreaking, but it will affect your game in other ways. At the end of the day, it's still a completely 95% workable product, but I wasn't able to get a perfect emulation. That may be possible with more tinkering, but got most of the way there at least.
Yeah, and if you don't want to bother with all that crap, then, just give it a purchase on the Wii U.
Yeah, it's easier that way. So with me, Pokemon Snap, I have literally never played this game before. I'm a person who has played pretty much every Pokemon game, and I was in the age group that were absolutely Pokemon fanatics when they were younger. So although I'm very familiar with the basic source material, I never sat down and played Pokemon Snap, which is an artifact of me never having owning a Nintendo 64. But since James suggested the game in the first place, I imagine you're a little more familiar with it, right?
Yeah, so back when I was going through, kind of grade 7, grade 8 back in school, one week I got very, very ill with the flu, not unlike last week. And, I sat at home with a rented copy of Pokemon Snap all week, just, playing the hell out of it. So I was wondering if it's still held up today.
So the basic premise of Pokemon Snap is that it's an on-rail shooter where instead of shooting enemies, you take pictures of Pokemon. There are 6 or 7 courses throughout the game, and you're in a little rail car that's going along rails, so you don't control your movement at all. All you really control is the orientation of your camera. There are a couple of items you get to interact with your environment. And the goal is to take good Pokemon pictures. You have to take Pokemon pictures where they're facing you, them doing interesting things, and them centralized in the frame. And as you go through the safari, you have varied opportunities to take those photos, and you need to take the best photos you can. That's the basic idea of the game. So now that you understand that, I'm going to turn the discussion over to James, as he is the Pokemon Snap expert. Where would you like to start with talking about this game, James?
Well, the first thing that strikes me about this game, in comparison to a lot of others, is that there's no explicit fail state in this game. There's no way to lose the game when you're playing it. It's the video game equivalent of going on a nature walk and looking at the scenery. There's no stakes, nothing crazy is going to happen if you take a bad photo. You're just, going through these levels, such as a beach, enjoying the ride and taking photos. It's not a very mechanically demanding game, and what really strikes to me is just how enjoyable it still manages to be without being that demanding of the player.
So what you're saying is that even though there's no intrinsic challenge, it's still an enjoyable game. I agree with you to a point that there is no straight up fail state or you died doesn't appear on the screen, but I still think that you can be failing at doing things in the game. You can be taking bad photographs, and there's certain sequences of events that you can fail to do. You can fail your accuracy throwing things at people. Even though the game doesn't tell you failed, there is still the concept of failure, surely.
No, I completely agree. What I was trying to say was there's no explicit failure states. There's no game overs.
Sure.
No continues. There's definitely, implicit failures, taking bad photos. Because in this game, you're on rails and you can't slow your car or stop your car as you're traveling through these safari zones. So if you go past a cool Pokemon without taking a good picture, you got to do the whole thing again. And, that's kind of like an implied failure, right?
Yeah, it's a lost opportunity. A lot of the time, you need to be in a very precise position at the right time, aiming your camera in the right location to get what for me was a good photograph. And I was very motivated in trying to get good photographs. I always felt disappointed when my photograph was a little crappy. So, yeah, you're right that although there's no explicit failure condition, I certainly felt like a failure after certain courses and with certain photos.
Yeah, absolutely. After each course, you exit the level through the exit gate, and then you're able to go through, your 20, 30, 40 photos that you've taken and select about 6 of them to show to the Pokemon professor after the level, and then he'll give you a high score based on, how good the photo was. The first thing he measures is how close you were to the shot. Did you get the entirety of the Pokemon in the photo, or was it too far away? You'll get a terrible score if you took the photo from behind and not the front of the Pokemon. And you'll also get a much reduced score if you don't get them in the center of the frame. So all of these things kind of contribute to whether or not the photo is considered good. And I guess, you're right. The implied failure, the main one at least, is taking a bad photo and getting, a really crummy amount of points. Because essentially, the game's progression system is tied to you amassing a total number of points throughout the game to unlock the new levels.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's got this intrinsically more relaxed style to it because it's not beating you over the head with failure, and there's no penalty or punishment for repeating a course as many times as you choose. So really, a missed shot, the only thing that you're being punished is the time it takes to go through the course and try again. But I agree that gives you an overall more relaxed sort of atmosphere, but I still think that there is a decent degree of challenge, even if in some way it's self-imposed.
Yeah, absolutely. Pokemon Snap is in my opinion, the ultimate comfy game, right? You're just gently traveling along these courses, looking at these adorable creatures to take photos of. There's no threats, there's no tension, there's just you and the environment and, snapping pictures to your heart's content. And, I struggle to think of another game that gives this, comfy, relaxed feeling, other than maybe The Sims or something like that.
You don't play many walking simulators, I guess.
I play walking simulators, but they always have, story tension to them at least.
Not always. There are some like Proteus where you're like, is this even a game? But they have that similar sort of comfy feel. There's also a couple of exploration games. But yeah, I agree with your overall point that on the face of it at least, and I say on the face of it, Pokemon Snap is a relaxing game. But when I started to get to the end of the game and there were specific Pokemon I needed to catch, it got a little bit less comfy. Some of the challenges in this game are quite tricky to accomplish, and you got to be pretty precise with your ball throwing.
Yeah, they can be. So in this game, as you progress, you start off just being able to go through a level on your cart. So the first level's the beach, and it's just you and your camera. But as you unlock more and more, you take better and better photos, and you amass your overall score, the professor starts providing you with some items that you can use to kind of interact with the world. So the first one you get, for example, is an apple that you can throw. And, stationary Pokemon will walk towards the apple and start eating it. So, you can use it to position them in better places to get better shots, or you can just bop them on the head in an understated act of animal cruelty to knock them over. Or, in the case of Charmander, push him into a lake of lava, forcing him to evolve.
You're doing him a favor. He got to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely doing him a favor, knocking him out and pushing him into his burning death. Lovely stuff. One of the things that really interests me about this game is, as we said, it's on rails. You have no control over where you're going through the level, but at the same time, it's still, to me, fundamentally an exploration game. You're not exploring in the sense of changing your location, finding new areas that you haven't seen before. You're exploring in the sense that you're reaching out, throwing items in different spots and trying to goad Pokemon into the right spots, or even find hidden ones in tall grass that you didn't know were there before. And I find that really interesting.
If this is an exploration game, for me, it's actually a pretty poor one. There were certain parts of the interactivity I enjoyed, but it's ultimately pretty limited. And for every good piece of interactivity, I felt there was a poor one. Let me give you an example of what I mean. One of my favorite moments in the entire game is actually drawing on a bit of meta knowledge I have about the Pokemon universe. Because, I'm, like I said, I was playing at the age where Pokemon was the big thing at school. And so I know all of the original 150 Pokemon in great detail. And I knew, for example, that the way Slowpoke evolved was that a Shelder gets attached to his tail and he evolves into Slowbro. So there's a level where there's a Slowpoke near where Shelders are. So you lure him over to the Shelders. A Shelder bites his tail and he evolves into Slowbro. Excellent. Really enjoyed that piece of interactivity. The bits I didn't get was when seemingly doing random things cause Pokemon to do random things or events to happen. Like there's a bit where you knock a Pokemon called Weepinbell into water and it evolves into Victory Bell. And to me, there's no sense to that either in the lore or in any hints in the level. It's just doing random event X gives you a random Pokemon that you didn't have access to before. And to me, exploration needs to have some sort of logical underpinning with it. There's got to be something to lead you from point A to B. If you're just doing random acts to see what happens as a result of those random acts, it starts becoming a much less enjoyable experience.
Okay, I quite disagree. I think there was much more fun when there was the sense of surprise, or you found something unexpected because you just happened to try that new idea that popped into your head. And that example you gave of the Weeping Bell turning into the Victory Bell, I quite enjoyed.
It's just a random number generator at that point. Like you're inputting a random input and getting a random output and hoping it works.
I don't think that's quite the case because, earlier in the game, there was a lava pit that, you quite obviously were able to knock that Charmeleon into to evolve it into the Charizard, and it's really just an extension of that idea. There's the same Weeping Bell walking around a pool of water. Just by throwing something at it, pretty likely to knock it in after a couple of shots.
Yeah, so the thing about the Charmeleon thing is there's a scene earlier on that same level where there's a Charmander and a Magma will attack it if you do the right thing and it turns into a Charmeleon. And I kind of like that because, the idea is that he's a fire Pokemon with a fire tail. And when the fire gets bigger, he evolves, right? At least that's what I remember vaguely from my time watching the Pokemon TV show. So I was like, yeah, the Charmeleon goes in lava. I can kind of see a somewhat logical link there. Wasn't there for the other case. And I know that it's all like silly game logic. It isn't like hard logic. But to me, there's got to be something. Another example that worked a bit better for me was at some point you need to take a bunch of photos with Pikachu being near Digletts. And if you do that, a Dugtrio emerges.
Yeah, I like that one.
And while on the face of that, it's just random things. At the very least, there is a clue in the level. If you hit a nearby Electabuzz, it lights up a screen that shows you a picture of Pikachu with the Dugtrio. So for me, I don't need much, but I need something. When it's purely random, the exploration, as you said, doesn't appeal to me as much.
Yeah, see, I actually completely disagree still. I find that if I can see a hint in the level and then I can foresee the outcome ahead of time, when I actually get to the reward, it doesn't feel as exciting because I saw it coming, essentially. I'm not surprised or delighted by this new outcome because I guessed that it was going to happen and I was right. So for me, a lot of the best interactions with the environment were the ones where I got a completely unexpected outcome.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're just diametrically opposed on this. I need there to be a logical link there. It can't just be random things happening.
But despite your grievances with the system, would you agree that it's somewhat there's exploration and experimentation in the systems there, right?
Yeah. So it's not that there isn't exploration and experimentation. I just felt like it was a little 50-50 in terms of how well it was executed. There were some I really liked, others where. So without looking at walkthroughs or anything, I got to about 57 of the 63 Pokemon in the game. And then doing some of those last one, I was like, how were you meant to figure this out? Like the one that really annoyed me was evolving Grimer into Muck. You just have to hit him 4 times, or 3 or 4 times, and he evolves into Muck. I'm like, there's literally nothing that suggests that would happen if I would do that. Am I meant to just use every single item on every single Pokemon over the course of every course to figure these things out? Like, I don't know. If I have to get out a checklist and combine every combination of A with B and C, etc., I don't know. It's just not for me. I like it when there's a way to figure these things out within the mechanisms of the game itself.
Okay, the Muck example I can agree with. That was kind of bullshit. There is definitely a scale for this system where it gets to be annoying, but I think that for me, in most cases, it did hit the sweet spot. And it's interesting to me because I don't believe I've ever played another game that I would consider to be exploration-based where I can't, move my character, essentially.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a different sort of perspective because on-rail games don't really exist nowadays. An on-rail game where you're taking photographs is even weirder. And an on-rails game where you take photos, but it's all about interacting with the environment and getting new and weird things to happen is fairly unique. So certainly one of a kind.
Yeah, and I personally place quite a high valuation on unique experiences in my games. There's hundreds of thousands of games these days to choose from, and there aren't that many anymore that I would really consider to be unique experiences, and I think this is definitely one of them.
When I was playing this game, I was doing searches for games like Pokemon Snap. From my personal experience, it's like I've played Beyond Good and Evil, which has a camera minigame attached to it. BioShock and BioShock 2 have a camera, but they're basically just ways to do extra damage to enemies ultimately. And there's a random African safari game called Africa that I've never played in my life. And the only other game that seemed similar was one called Fatal Frame, which is a horror game where you kill ghosts by taking pictures of them. But that's it. Like it was certainly a unique experience, and like you, I did value it for its novelty.
Yeah, and taking good pictures is actually pretty satisfying, especially one of the mechanics of the photo taking that I really like is that you get a lot of extra score by managing to get a heap of the same Pokemon in one shot. And so some of the levels, it becomes a real game to try and get, as many of these little critters in the photo as you can. One of the ones that stands out to me is in the volcano level. There are a bunch of Charmander just before an egg that's blocking your way on the track, and you can use the egg to block your cart so it stops moving, and then spend a good 5 to 10 minutes throwing apples to lure like 12 Charmanders into the same spot to get an absolutely massive score, and I found that really fun.
Yeah, I have to say that exploration aside, the main thing I enjoyed about this game, I guess, for like what you'd call the core photography mechanics, taking good shots. That's what I enjoyed more than coming up with the sequence of events I needed to unlock this thing by doing random things. So taking good shots by using your items to lure people around. And later on, you get a thing that lets your cart speed up. Like you just hold down a button and you zoom along the track a lot faster. And getting that upgrade was huge for me because there were a number of spots where I was really annoyed that I was like, how is it even possible to get a good photograph when the Pokemon disappears before I can get close to it? But if you time those speed boosts correctly, you can get in really good positions to take pictures of Pokemon. So I enjoyed manipulating my environment to get the best shot possible, framed well. And when I saw the final photo in the album, it gave me a rush of pleasure when I nailed it perfectly.
Yeah, and I really liked the little scoring segments at the end of each level. I thought that the way they, I think it's got a lot of good feedback in the way the points just start, skyrocketing if you've done a really good job. And Professor Oak giving you good feedback is a little fun for your inner child.
Yeah, importantly, the points you get are usually reflective of how good you feel about the shot. It's not always true, but most of the time when you take a good photo, you'll get a good point score. There was one annoying exception that really pissed me off. You know how you can get the Magnemites to evolve into a Magneton?
Yes.
By putting them on top of one another? Once again, that's another good example I liked. I'm using my Pokemon knowledge here. But I took a photo with the Magneton right in the middle. It was really close. It was perfect. But because the center of the photo was the gap between the three Magnemites, he's like, terrible photo, get good.
That's amazing.
But most of the time, it was fairly reflective. So it was accurate enough that I was happy with it.
And it was very consistent too. There were very clear and consistent rules to what constitutes a good shot. And I really appreciated that because it made knowing what you had to do, that much clearer to the player.
Yeah, one of the issues I had when I first started playing the game before I got the plugin was it was difficult to know if a shot counted as a center shot or not. But but it's very useful when you've got the plugin installed and everything. Your reticle goes red when the Pokemon's at the center of the frame. So you know that when you take the photograph. And normally you know when you've taken a good photograph even before you've seen the picture of it ready to show to Oak.
Yeah, before I'd realized that the game was a broken mess without that plugin, the reason I figured that out was because there's a number of Pokemon that you can only find if you take the picture while the dot is red, like Muck, for example. To get that Grimer to even appear, you have to take a middle shot of the first two Grimers in the level, and then the third one will rock up. But, I was taking these center shots perfectly like 4 times in a row, and, that third Grimer just wasn't appearing. So, after a lot of Googling, I found out that it was because the game was bugged and I couldn't actually get that red dot to appear.
Yeah, it was, luckily I didn't go too far in, so I only got a couple of courses unlocked before James saved me.
Speaking of the courses, I guess, there's not a whole lot of variety to the locations. One of the things that disappointed me about the game is just how kind of like generic the locations you were visiting were. And it was somewhat saved by the personality and, attention to detail in the Pokemon themselves that inhabited the area, but overall I wish that the environments had been a bit more exciting.
Okay, can you tell me what you mean by that? Because that wasn't a problem that I encountered at all. Like, you had the power station, you had a cave and a river. Like, if you look at the world of Pokemon, these locations seemed pretty fair to the sort of places you'd explore in the Pokemon games. So what was your expectation for the locations?
I guess just the locations are a bit bland, right? Like, there's the beach, and there's a river, and there's a volcano, which, they actually did a pretty good job of making the levels themselves interesting, but the themings of each levels were very, very straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, thematically, having a volcano level makes sense, because in the Pokemon games, there's a volcano section. I think that the blandness comes out more in the architecture of the levels. Like, this is very much Nintendo 64 era 3D. So that kind of like big, ugly spaces, hugely stretched polygons. There's a lot of awkward angles going on for the mountains and everything. But in terms of how they are thematically, I don't know what else I'd expect.
Yeah, I guess it's unfair. The world of Pokemon is, aside from the creatures themselves, pretty grounded in reality, honestly. So
yeah, which works to its benefit as well, I think, because the world of Pokemon is so, you're able to connect with it so much because it is so much like our world, just with Pokemon. So to me, the lack of fantastical locations isn't a problem, even though the main problem I have with it, I guess, is the bland aesthetic. But what you were saying about the personality of the Pokemon, I think is absolutely true, though.
Yes, I think the graphics of this game haven't aged very well, as you were saying. There's a lot of painfully stretched textures all over the place. But the Pokemon themselves look... the models are a bit dated, but the animations on the little critters are absolutely great, and their personalities really shine through in the game world. And I think that really absolutely helps the game as a result.
I think that, once again, it's hard to talk about Pokemon designs as anything other than a very invested Pokemon player. But I think that the original Pokemon designs, the original 150, are absolutely brilliant. Like, actually brilliant in how well they all stick to your memory. Each Pokemon has a pretty simplistic design, but it's not that it's boring. They all take a particular aspect or aesthetic and amp it up to 100, but they still exist in such a way that if you gave a child a piece of paper, they would be able to draw their favorite Pokemon no problem whatsoever. They're all immediately all stand out. They pop out of the environment. Their colors are wonderful. You can tell by the silhouette what Pokemon you're looking at, right? So I don't know. I think that the design of the Pokemon is brilliant, and that elevates the aesthetic as a whole.
I'm sorry, I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that the original designs are absolutely timeless. My criticism was more on the Nintendo 64's low poly models. Their reputation in-game, they're a bit low. And one of the reasons this sticks out to me specifically is because this is a game about taking photos of these low poly models. So in that respect, I think the game's aged a little poorly, but as you said, the designs are fantastic, so I think it's still, an enjoyable thing to do because of that. And, as we said, in the game world, these Pokemon act like they do, like you'd expect them to in the show. They're overflowing with charm in the game world. The way they react to each item you throw. There's an item that's just the Poker Flute from the first game, and when you play it, a lot of them will jump up and start dancing in this really endearing way. And I think that kind of level of charm really helps to make Pokemon Snap that comfy, relaxed, charming experience.
I think my favorite example of the charm is if you rescue these Jigglypuffs as you're moving through the cave level, at the end of the level, they'll be on a platform singing to you. But if you play the Pokey Flute while they're singing, they'll get really mad at you and they have grumpy faces. And once again, I can't remember if this is like in-game lore or if it's from the TV show, but I definitely remember Jigglypuffs being incredibly annoyed if anyone else hogged the spotlight from them. So that was a nice little moment.
Yeah, I like that too, and it made for a great photo of these, 3 grumpy Pokemon.
Which I'm sure will feature somewhere.
Yeah, and so I've harped on a little bit about the models and stuff like that. Did you have anything particular to say about the game's aesthetics?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've kind of gone into it in great detail already. But yeah, I guess the thing that stood out to me is the Pokemon were all brilliant. The environments were a little bland. I was interested in how the fact that it was on rails affected the graphical performance. You're not able to free roam in this game, which actually works to the game's asset because a lot of the graphics from the Nintendo 64 and PS1 era, when you're fully controlling the camera, it's ugly. You're constantly seeing the inside of mountains and like weird overlaying textures and stuff like that. Because you're on rails and in a fixed location, all of the 3D tricks it comes up with all work perfectly. You never see these horizons just expanding into nothingness. You're always perfectly positioned. So yeah, my overall feelings on the graphics and aesthetics is that the Pokemon look fantastic, filled with emotion and attitude. They really pop out of the levels. The levels themselves are thematically pretty normal, but like I said, it's what you expect. And some of the ugly Nintendo 64 texture stretching is a bit annoying, but ultimately not to the great detraction of the levels. The aesthetics are perfectly fine. I'm happy with them as a person who loves Pokemon.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they detract from the experience at all. Actually, one of the things I really liked was Professor Oak appears as like a 2D sprite on the main menu that's kind of animated, and I thought he actually like really nailed the look of him from the anime, which is really good.
Yeah, it did make me uncomfortable when he started speaking, though. Like, I'm so used to Professor Oak speaking or not speaking and just being text on your screen. So hearing the voice of Professor Oak was off-putting for me. I would have preferred it just being text.
Really? That's so weird.
Yeah, I've got my preferences for what Pokemon's like. Professor Oak's not meant to talk.
I was actually quite pleasantly surprised at the fact that there was voice acting on the N64, honestly.
I'll pass.
Speaking of sound, this one's a little interesting for me. I don't think that the music in this game is the kind of music that you would go out of your way to listen to after the fact, but I did think that the instruments that they chose for each soundtrack were very on point. Each track for each level does a really good job of nailing the atmosphere that the level's trying to go for. You're going down the river and there are these gushing water sounds, or you're in this beach level and you can hear this really iconic Hawaiian themed music almost, and I thought that each track did a very good job of communicating the atmosphere to the player.
Yes, the music was fine. I particularly liked the cave and tunnel music. I think the tunnel music was my favorite. It was like a bit spooky and echoey. And I like that a lot. I'm really just fundamentally not a fan of the upbeat tunes though, which is okay. I know a lot of people love them, but I just cannot get into these cheery, chippy tunes like the ones on the beach and stuff. I don't know. The music was fine. There were a couple of tracks I enjoyed. The rest were whatever. I agree with you that the sound design is pretty on point though. It's more environmental sound, but that's what you want. You're on rails. You don't need a million different sound effects. You just want to be somewhat immersed in the environment that you're going through. And I was immersed, so
Yeah, I actually really liked the cave as well, and I thought the valley was pretty good too. I think that the music is good, but it's not excellent. It does a really good job of setting the tone for each level, but other than that, I don't think it really, rises above to be one of these all-time great soundtracks.
yeah, I agree. And part of that is the fact that it's designed to be minimalistic and in the background as you're going on a safari, as opposed to in your face. But yeah, it does what it does very well. I thought it was fine, and with a couple of tracks I enjoyed. I give it a B for better than Banjo-Kazooie.
You give every soundtrack a B for better than Banjo-Kazooie, and that's because you have bad taste.
Some of them get A's, but yeah, most I'd say that's the minimum grade for most soundtracks.
So Patrick, you're a big story guy, right? Tell us a bit about the story of Pokemon Snap.
Are you for real, James?
What, you don't want to tell me about the grand adventures of Todd Snap and his camera?
The game doesn't have a story.
It has a story, almost, maybe.
Listen, James, you tell me what the story is, because I don't know what the story is if this game has a story.
You play as Todd Snap, a renowned Pokemon photographer.
Is that his actual name?
Yeah, it's Todd Snap. How great is that?
Oh, my God.
Todd actually appeared in the TV show, and I don't know why they made his name Snap. It's kind of painful, but you're essentially just helping the professor with his research by taking pictures. There's not really much to that, other than the fact that you're tracking down a super rare Pokemon on the island that the game takes place on. And to that end, finding this super secret Pokemon involves taking a picture of 6 important landmarks hidden throughout the world. How'd you find finding those?
Well, firstly, talking about it in a story sense, it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't.
Why does taking some pictures of landmarks around the world help you find the Pokemon? I don't understand it. But the actual mechanical process of finding those landmarks was great. I enjoyed it. It was a nice change of pace from finding, taking pictures of Pokemon, having to constantly scanning your environment to find Pokemon that, find landmarks that look like Pokemon. There was one that took me forever to find, and eventually I gave in and consulted a walkthrough. It was the
volcano?
Yeah, the smoke cloud that apparently resembled coughing.
I found that very difficult too. I had to look it up as well.
I didn't even think to... I think I may have thrown something in that volcano to trigger the smoke cloud at one point and then decided it did nothing. So that was my failing. But in general, yeah, it was fun. I want to talk once more about the device you get at this point, which is the speed up thing. It's called the R drive or something. I think this was one of the best upgrades they possibly could have given you, because to me, it's an upgrade that both enhances gameplay, but is also a massive quality of life improvement. And being able to bring those two things together is wonderful. And it doesn't happen enough in games. Because the primary downside of this game mechanically is that if you miss an opportunity to take a photo, you have to restart the course or go through the rest of the course slowly. Or if it's at the end of the course, you have to monotonously go through the course for a couple of minutes before you get where you need to go. The R drive doesn't only let you get in good positions to take Pokemon, it also lets you essentially skip the boring parts of the course that you're already done with. So getting that upgrade at that point when the game is mostly finished in inverted commas was fantastic. It was a very good design choice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It was getting a bit, almost a bit tedious at points, having to re-go through levels to get things that you missed. So that ability to go that much faster really helped me to not find the repetition annoying, because you're just going through it pretty quickly.
Mechanically, finding those Pokemon hidden in the environment was good. It would have been nice if they were slightly more hidden. I guess some of them were very obvious, but it is what it is. And at least one was so hidden that I needed to find a walkthrough. So
Yeah, the one I needed to find a walkthrough to find was Gyarados. I thought that one was pretty challenging to find. You had to do about 2 or 3 different things in the level to get it to appear, but it was quite satisfying once I got it.
oh, sorry, I'm talking just about the environmental Pokemon. Sorry, like yeah,
yeah.
like the coughing. So the idea is that there are disguised environmental features that resemble Pokemon, and you have to take photos of those to get the final stage. What James is talking about is hidden Pokemon in the sense that you have to do a series of things in order to get a Pokemon to appear. And it was certainly more than one that I was missing. I was missing about 6 to 7 at the end of the game that I didn't know how to activate. One of them was Muck, but yeah, Gyarados was another one that I couldn't find.
Gyarados was a lot more fun to activate than Muck was, though, at least.
Yeah.
Even though I had to look it up, it took me a couple goes, but I found it to be, quite entertaining. Did you end up getting them all by the end? It's quite a short game.
Yes. So like I said, I've found 56 or 57 of the 63 without a walkthrough, and then I'm like, I don't know how to find these other ones. And it was at the stage where I was like, I feel like I'm at random number generator, like doing stuff to different Pokemon and different things will trigger different responses, but I have no idea how to actually go about it. And while that was true for some of them I guess I could have logicked my way through, but I didn't want to go through each course 50 times trying every combination of everything to find those last Pokemon, so I did look up a walkthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned the length before, but the game is only about 5 hours long, which I think is a pretty good length for this style of game. It's very unique, but I can imagine that best is a short and sweet experience.
It reminds me of Tony Hawk's in that way because it's a simple game, and if they tried, if this game just stretched up to 15 hours, I'd be sick of it. You could potentially include more content like Tony Hawk's did in its later entries, and you'd want to play more of it because at the end of it, I was like, I want more Pokemon Snap. But for what the experience is with the tools you get at your disposal, it is the perfect length.
So you're being pretty positive about this game so far. I'm actually kind of surprised. I was expecting you to completely hate this.
I don't know why. Like the game, well, to start with, it's all gameplay. Like the lack of a story works in its favor. If I was stuck down with some crappy story, that would have been points off immediately. But the thing is, I've always liked photography in games. Like Beyond Good and Evil is one of my treasured adventure games from my childhood. And the best part of that game was the photography. So being able to revisit photography as a game mechanic is something I was really excited for, and I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I've got little annoyances, but the fact is the core photography mechanic in this game is really good and really well implemented. So why did you think I wouldn't like it, I guess?
Maybe it's because it's not like a mechanically demanding game, and as we've spoken previously, that's something you quite value highly. And, this kind of game, it's really relaxing and comfy, and it doesn't demand much of the player. And for me, I thought that might turn you off, honestly.
The game, for me, I don't mind if a game is a comfy game, as you say. I've got another number of comfy games I would play. Like most recently, Outer Wilds. It's just a big explore 'em up. That's all it is. There's no stakes. There's no pressure. You can do the loop as many times as you choose. No problems. For me, I guess what I hate more than anything else is when a game wastes my time. And one of my major complaints about this game was going to be the fact that you have to go through courses over and over again at this slow, monotonous speed. And then I got the R drive, and I'm like, this is perfect. I mean, this is the perfect solution for the problem. So I don't know, man. Like, if a game doesn't waste my time and the core gameplay is good, then I'm pretty much on board for it.
All right, sweet. So that's a recommend for you then, I take it?
Yeah, absolutely. I do recommend Pokemon Snap. I'm actually shocked, as I'm sure many people are, that there were never any real sequels made to this game. There's so many things you could do to expand on this. Like nowadays, you could take the game off rails, no problem. Like make the whole game a Pokemon safari where different Pokemon will react to you in different ways. Playing this game sends my imagination spinning with the sorts of things I could do with sequels. Like I really want to play a Pokemon photography game that just dramatically expands on this concept. But for what it is, Pokemon Snap is really good, and there's not any competition out there. So yeah, I absolutely do recommend this game. There are some niggles, like it's never going to be one of my top 10 games of all time, but as you said, the fact that it's a unique experience and it's a unique, enjoyable experience absolutely gets my stamp of recommendation. It's a good game.
Yeah, and particularly because it's very short, we clocked about 5 hours. To be that unique and that short, it's really hard to be like, it's a bit hard to fit this in. You can just play this whenever and it's, a great time. I absolutely recommend this as well. And, as you were talking about, I think that this could be its own series with a whole bunch of sequels. They could do so much with this, and I'm really disappointed that they haven't so far. Can you imagine this game in VR? That would be incredible.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like I swear they could make money hand over fist if they were to do it. And it boggles me because I really don't think it's too complicated. It's not like there are technological problems with it anymore. It's just it was never done. I don't understand. I don't understand why they haven't done something more with this idea or just with photography games in general. Maybe there's some complication to it that I don't understand, but I swear Pokemon Snap 2 would be a roaring hit. So yeah. With
Yes.
Tony Hawk, when I finished Tony Hawk, it's a simple game. When I finished it, you can play Tony Hawk 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a million games in the series that expand on the concept. Pokemon Snap, it's like play this random adventure game that also happens to have photography, and that's it. So
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So big yes from both of us here. We've got a little extra bit of time left because this was a short one. So I just wanted to give you a quick question. If there was a sequel, what were some things that you would like to see in it?
Me, well, like I said, sorry, I thought that was a question to the audience for a second there. So what I would like to see is I want to see them take it free roaming. Like I'd love to have a fully 3D off rails Pokemon Snap experience. Obviously, that has a host of logistical problems, but there's no reason in today's world that such a thing couldn't be possible. Like, imagine the world of Pokemon, but instead of getting into fights and stuff as you do in the normal Pokemon games, instead you're just a wildlife photographer who has to keep positioning himself to try and find all of the Pokemon. And you can have like the area around you at the start of the game with Rattatas and Pidgeys as normal, the common Pokemon, and rarer Pokemon as you venture further and further into the wilderness. All of the things that make the normal Pokemon game work with increasing rarities of Pokemon and the desire to catch them all works perfectly for a Pokemon Snap game. And in fact, you still want to capture them all, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what I'm keen for, James. What about you? Are you married to the on rails concept, or do you have something else?
I actually am. I think that the on rails idea adds a lot to the uniqueness of the game, but I would like to see a bit more freedom, as you would. Maybe branching paths. Imagine you're in a mine tunnel and you throw an apple at a lever that switches the track that you're on, and that kind of thing. So, there's still that bit of exploration and touching and feeling around the world. And you do get a little bit of freedom, but I think that constant forward movement, giving you the opportunity to miss shots, actually does add a bit to that feeling of eventually getting that good shot. So I think that having you be able to miss shots is an important thing that I would like to keep in the series.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways you can do it. For example, you could limit the amount of film that you can take with you on a more open world game. In Pokemon Snap, you've got like 60 shots per ride, which may as well be infinite. for the sake of it. So, but I take your point. The on rails experience does offer a unique angle, and like you said, branching paths, special events. Like you have to trigger a special event by, I don't know, hitting 5 switches or something. I don't know. I don't know. The thing is, nothing's been tried. Like there's an ocean of possibilities of things that people could try with this game, and I'd be open to whatever the developers of Pokemon Snap 2 wanted to do. But the fact that there isn't a sequel is a real tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that about brings us to the end. And as we've seen, we both love this game. It's not either our favourite game of all time, but it's absolutely a recommend. So, check it out. If you're going to emulate it, make sure you look out for the instructions on our website for getting it running smoothly. With that said, next week, Patrick, your game's coming up, and I know you told me what game we were going to play, but I absolutely cannot remember. So how about you remind me and the audience
well, firstly,
for us?
James, I'd like to thank you for finally getting us to play a game from your childhood that isn't complete garbage. So points to you there.
Yeah.
We've made great strides. We're going to another game from my childhood, and as it is me, it is, of course, a shooting game. But it's a shooting game that I remember the shooting not being the highlight. It's called Max Payne. Max Payne is a game where the story has stuck with me. It's like a neo-noir tale. It's, very black and white, very gritty, very horrible things happen. So from a storytelling perspective, it's right up my alley. I tend to like the more bleak, depressing, gritty stories over the happy ones. It's also famously the game that introduced bullet time into the mainstream. If it wasn't the first to have bullet time as a core gaming concept, it was at the very least the game that popularized it. So Max Payne, I'm mainly interested in revisiting it for the story, and I'm not looking forward to platforming those blood trails because I have nightmares about them, and I'm sure you will too when we get to it.
Oh boy, I'm looking forward to it. I have no experience with the Max Payne series. Apart from watching the movie when I was younger, and let me say that movie was god-awful, so I can only imagine what the story in the game is like.
Yeah, video game movies are no good, but yeah, it's definitely cheesy noir, and I love noir, so one of my favorite guilty genres that I enjoy. So I'm mainly interested in revisiting it for the story, but of course it's a video game, so I will be evaluating it on all fronts.
Yeah, and with that, I guess we've reached the end of the show. Thanks for listening. You can find us and the rest of our content at our website on rspodcast.net, or follow us on Twitter at retpodcast, that's R-E-T podcast, for all kinds of reviews and silly articles from both myself and mostly Patrick.
Well, I mean, certainly silly articles from James. My articles are all masterpieces. But we have all the content on our website. We always put up an article which is related to the podcast episode. So if you don't have time to listen to the full cast, you can go check out the article. So please do go and check that out and let us know what you think.
And from both of us, thanks for listening and have a good week.
Ciao.